Iran isn't shutting down its capital because of enemy missiles. It's shutting down because the taps have run dry. In the middle of 120 degrees Fahrenheit heat, reservoirs have hit rock bottom, and millions of people are without water for 12 hours a day. Yet while ordinary citizens are left parched, the government is funneling billions into the military, leaving pennies for the crumbling pipes that actually keep people alive. Tehran is standing on the edge of waking up to a morning without water, a day zero scenario the world once saw in Cape Town, now repeating in the Middle East. Rainfall over the past 4 months has dropped about 40% below the long-term average, sending reservoir levels around the capital into unprecedented decline. 70% of Tehran's residents consume more than the recommended 130 liters per person per day, a habit that makes every conservation campaign fragile. Even the government admits this is the biggest choke point in water management. Imagine nearly 10 million people waking up, turning on the tap, and not a single drop comes out. It sounds like apocalyptic fiction, yet President Masoud Pezeshkian has publicly warned, unless consumption is cut now, the dams supplying the capital could run dry by September or October. Beneath the city, another crisis is quietly turning the valve towards zero. Land subsidence of up to 31 centimeters per year in Varamin, just outside Tehran. Pipelines, rail lines, and power poles are cracking as decades of groundwater pumping leave the ground hollow. As the earth sinks, joints in the water grid snap, losses rise, pressure drops, and the spiral of shortage tightens with each passing day. Agriculture consumes as much as 80 to 90% of Iran's total water, most of it through inefficient irrigation. Meanwhile, urban demand keeps climbing under the twin pressures of extreme heat and population growth. The math is simple. Unless the fields are quenched with water-saving technologies, the taps in the cities will continue to run dry. Even worse, this year's crisis was primed by a hidden fuse. Reserves were paper-thin from the start, a fact rarely highlighted in the press. Tehran's water buffer was already fragile at the beginning of the hydrological year. Government statistics show that by early January, the 5 main dams supplying the capital were averaging just 19% capacity. That meant a single-week rainy season like this one was enough to erase the safety margin almost instantly. Now, as reservoirs around Tehran hit bottom, satellite images and on-site footage show cracked, dusty shorelines. This isn't just drought. It's the compounded result of 5 years of parched skies, weak management, and aging infrastructure. The city has fallen into what experts call the strangling triangle: overconsumption, underground pipes snapping from subsidence, wafer-thin reserves from the outset. Once all 3 jaws clamp shut, even extra rainfall won't be enough to break free. In this context, saving 1 twist of the tap per household suddenly becomes less symbolic and more like a downstream sandbag holding back a dam break. If the 70% of households currently exceeding limits cut their overuse, day zero could be pushed back by several critical weeks, enough time to restart pumping stations, patch pipelines, and bring temporary supplies online. Tehran is thirsty not just because of the sky, but because underground mains are being torn apart by collapsed aquifers, because consumption habits exceed sustainable limits, and because the seasonal buffer was paper-thin from the start. Unless those 3 forces are reversed, the warning of dams empty by early autumn won't remain rhetoric. It will be a rationing calendar posted on every household door. It's not just drought, this is a design flaw built in from the reservoirs all the way to the taps. For decades, Iran followed a build the dam first, figure out management later approach. 523 large dams are now in operation, but many have turned into disasters. The Upper Gatvan Dam is the textbook case. Built directly on top of a salt dome, it allowed tens of millions of tons of salt to leach into the reservoir, salting the entire Karun River system. The stored water could no longer be used for farming or drinking. This was not a natural disaster. It was a technical and management failure, one that academic papers had warned about long before it happened. But the biggest lock on the system lies in water use itself. Agriculture consumes about 90% of all withdrawals, most of it through traditional flood irrigation where massive losses occur through seepage and evaporation. Cities and industries are left to fight over what remains. This picture is confirmed by international datasets and academic overviews. At the same time, urban distribution networks leak heavily. Non-revenue water hovers around 30%. In other words, nearly 1/3 of every cubic meter pumped is lost before reaching the TAP. It's like an invisible reservoir with a hole at the bottom, rarely highlighted in media because it lies underground. And beneath the cities, a silent saboteur is snapping the pipes apart, land subsidence from overpumped aquifers. In Tehran and its surrounding region, rates of up to 31 centimeters per year have been recorded. Critical infrastructure, from railways and highways to power lines in Tehran, has cracked. As the ground settles unevenly, underground pipes are forced to bend and stretch, causing joints to crack and leak more. This creates a vicious spiral. Groundwater depletion, land subsidence, pipes break, losses rise, more pumping. Engineering studies on buried pipe deformation under shifting soils confirm that this mechanism is real and predictable. Another root cause, rarely admitted openly, is the hyper-centralized system that lacks integrated coordination. Iran's water supply and drainage fall under the Ministry of Energy and the NWWEC. This centralization allows rapid rollout of big projects, but it slows the closing of the reuse loop, makes it difficult to devolve responsibility to local authorities, and leaves 30% losses unresolved for years. Recent policy analyses urge a shift toward a circular water economy, reuse, recycling, and tapping unconventional sources as a core strategy instead of simply adding new supply. At the institutional and interest group level, the shadow of mega contractors looms large. Khatam Al-Anbiya, the IRGC's engineering arm, has been identified as a major player in dam construction and inter-basin transfers. Investment priorities skew toward heavy CAPEX, big infrastructure, rather than OPEX, maintenance and leak control. Glory lies in groundbreakings, while durability is hidden in every joint. The result, water losses win out. Domestic data show that a negative water balance sheet has already formed. Officials admit, we owe our aquifers about 155 billion cubic meters and our ecosystems 47 billion cubic meters. Meanwhile, the government openly talks about relocating parts of Tehran because the city has become barely livable. This water debt doesn't appear on the national budget, but it eats away at the foundations of life. Each season of overpumping is essentially a payday loan against the future. Iran's water crisis isn't explained by one short rainfall number but by three loose bolts: flawed infrastructure design and poor upkeep, skewed demand structures with aging, subsiding distribution networks, and massive leakage. No. When the state keeps pouring more water into a cracked barrel, building new dams, drilling new wells, without fixing the bottom, the result is only a ballooning water debt. The people's thirst becomes destiny, not accident, and while citizens scrape for every drop, another paradox comes into sharp relief. While ordinary Iranians struggle to find water in record heat, the national budget continues to prioritize tanks over taps. In 2022, Iran's spending on security and defense was 6 times larger than what it allocated to address the water crisis. The government poured about $13 billion into military and security programs, while just $2.2 billion went to water resources. This stark imbalance reveals a painful paradox. The regime is willing to bankroll the military, intelligence services, and nuclear projects, yet drags its feet on keeping the lights on and water flowing for its citizens. That anger has already spilled into the streets. Since 2021, waves of protests over water shortages and blackouts have erupted in Khuzestan, Isfahan, and even Tehran. In the sweltering 50 degrees Celsius heat, citizens march night after night demanding relief. Tragically, at least 3 people have been killed in recent demonstrations over water. Instead of listening and reallocating funds to public needs, the regime has cut off the internet and cracked down with force to silence dissent. But these heavy-handed tactics cannot quench the thirst that is growing more desperate across Iran. Analysts argue that today's water and power crisis is the direct result of decades of mismanagement, corruption, and skewed priorities. Over nearly 50 years of clerical rule, national resources have been misallocated. The IRGC and the so-called water mafia have profited from unsustainable dam projects, drained aquifers dry with overpumping, funneled electricity into crypto farms, and shielded water-hungry heavy industries. Layered on top of that, costly foreign wars have steadily bled away the country's lifeblood, all while infrastructure has fallen into disrepair. Drought and climate change are only the catalysts, exposing weaknesses that were already there, not the root causes. Put simply, Iran isn't just running out of water, it is being drained of vitality by its rulers' misguided choices. The reality of full tanks, dry taps, poses not only a survival challenge for citizens, but also a stability challenge for the regime itself. Without water and electricity, daily life and the broader economy are grinding to a halt. Iran's system seems to be stalling out. Unless the government urgently reorders its budget and invests heavily in sustainable solutions such as desalination plants, wastewater treatment, and modernized irrigation, Iran risks even deeper unrest. Millions of thirsty citizens are watching closely. Will the revenues continue to fund missiles and proxy armies, or will they finally be used to bring water back to a parched homeland? The answer will determine Iran's future in the years ahead. Looking back at Iran's story, the cost of pouring billions into the military while neglecting basic infrastructure becomes clear. The legacy left behind may not be victory, but a nation left thirsty and unstable. If Tehran continues to obsess over building arsenals instead of pipelines, or Iran's future will be bleak. Tens of millions may be forced to abandon their homes in search of drinking water, a catastrophic scenario not only for Iran but for the entire region. After all, a country can survive without tanks, but it collapses the moment the last drop of water runs dry. If you found this story thought-provoking, please share this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of global issues. What do you think about Iran's water crisis? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.